All right. Good morning, Mary Rose. How are we
Good
today?
morning. I'm doing well, Carrie. How are you?
Good, much better. I think, yeah, today's a good day. Um, so I want to welcome everybody that is watching or listening to this right now to our very first The Child's Voice podcast. Mary Rose and I are super excited. We've been planning this for the last couple of weeks. Just a new fun way idea to get training out, information out to you guys as advocates, hopefully in a little bit more funner way. So we are going to have fun with this. I have no doubt we're going to have fun with it. And today we're actually, for our first podcast, we're going to be introducing, and we're excited to introduce our new initiative, Stand Up, Speak Up. So, with volunteer special advocates being the only ones tasked with advocating for the best interests of kids now, it's more important than ever that we stand up, we make the child's voice heard. It is one of the most important things that being a CASA is about. That's who we are. That's what our advocate is speaking up in court, being their voice in court. So, even if you feel like you have nothing to say, you always have something to say. And we're definitely going to talk through that today. So today I'm talking with program coordinator Mary Rose Swan about some different practical tips, examples, and we're even going to do a little bit of role playing scenarios so that hopefully by the end of this you can feel more confident in the courtroom. For those of you that don't have the pleasure of working with Mary Rose, she comes to us with 6 years of experience advocating for children in Yellowstone County. She's passionate about advocating for kids as well as jumping at every opportunity to share that passion with others. So welcome, Mary Rose, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Carrie. I'm definitely excited to be here talking about this topic today. I do remember on my first few cases, as you mentioned, I've been doing this for 6 years. I was definitely a little nervous about going into the courtroom, and I didn't really feel like sometimes I had anything to add because, of course, I'd already written a report and thought that the report was kind of speaking for me. And truthfully, also kind of thought that I was taking up space in the courtroom that should be for other people. So, of course, before becoming an advocate, the most courtroom experience I'd ever had was, watching Law and Order and seeing how criminal cases were argued in a courtroom and trying to get out of jury duty. But when it comes to being an advocate for kids, we all are making observations about how our child is doing, whether it's in school, whether it's in their placement. And so being able to share those observations is what really makes a huge difference comparatively to, of course, CPS has an important job, but they're visiting once a month and then they're communicating with adults. We are the ones that are communicating with a child specifically every single month. So judges do rely on us to speak up. And personally, one of the things that I found was really helpful at getting over that idea of not necessarily feeling like I needed to take up space where attorneys in the courtroom or CPS was in the courtroom was imagining that if that kiddo was sitting right next to me and I was being asked if there was anything that I could, if that I wanted to share or any updates I had to provide, is to really think about would that kiddo be okay with me saying I had nothing to add, or would they be nudging me and saying, tell them I like playing basketball, tell them
Mhm.
I'm really good at swimming, those types of things. So when a judge does ask me now if I have anything to add, I imagine that they're looking at me and asking me to be their voice. And that imagery really helps a lot in getting over that fear or that imposter syndrome sometimes that we don't have as much to offer in the courtroom as anyone else does.
Yeah, I love that picture, right? I think that just makes it so much more powerful that okay, we are their voice. Yeah, what if they were right there? What would they want the judge to know? I love that. Even just look at my new haircut, or yeah, I have my braces off. So I love that analogy. And I think you hit on something, yeah, really important. I think that's one of the biggest fears that we hear from new advocates coming in is court. Oh my gosh, it's scary, right? It's like the gavel banging and people are yelling and you're absolutely right. I think people imagine this scary courtroom and then not only being in it, but then let alone having to stand up and speak, right? Speaking to a judge, right? We have this such reverence about the judges and oh my gosh, I need to talk to the judge. So let's dig in. Why are we even talking about this? Why is it important to speak up? Why do advocates need to stand up and speak up? I'm hoping that maybe you have an example of a time when you spoke up and how it led or how it changed the child's outcome.
Absolutely. Try to get me to stop talking and giving examples of why this is so important. That's a much harder task. So I remember on my first case, I had a teenage girl, and just for the purposes of keeping it confidential, we'll just call her Maria. She'd been in several placements and she had a pattern of running away. Obviously, when we're dealing with teens, that can be their easiest way of having control over a situation is to take themselves out of it. So every report that came across the court's desk painted her as defiant and non-compliant. So I had first met her, and one of the first times that I met her, she didn't want to talk to me. It was obvious that she didn't want to talk to me. She kept her hood up. She kept her eyes down. There was no real interaction. And that's okay. Sometimes that's going to be how it is with teenagers. But on my second visit, I did kind of start seeing behind that facade of being tough and street smart is that she wanted to meet me at a park that was really close to where she'd grown up, and she would look at the cars that were driving by. And I mean, it's interesting to point out what the first time that she really like interacted with me or said something, but she said, "Do you think my mom still drives her car?" And like kind of it was based on she'd seen a car that looked like her mom's car passing by. And so, I mean, it's innocuous. I mean, it was just a question. How many times do we get asked questions, sometimes even by our own kids, that we just immediately knee jerk answer?
Mhm.
And it told me something about her that she was running away from places that she was safe and she was taken care of, but she was really running towards something, and that was what she found familiar, like mom's old car. um I think that we all kind of have those things of like we see something that reminds us of somebody and we long for that familiarity with that person or that place. So we had been doing we met again, and during that visit she'd said basically kind of like I it could have been easy to blow it off, but she said, "I just want to go home before my little brother forgets me." And that really just shook me because she had not seen her brother in so long, and she was worried that he was actually going to forget what she looked like or what her voice sounded like. And so it was really, I think it struck me a lot that where we see rebellion and we see kids acting out or not, you know, I always say kids don't owe us anything, especially when it comes to their behavior, but that is such an indicator sometimes that they just don't have hope. They're losing hope. And for good reason sometimes. I mean, they're in a part of a system that really doesn't see them or hear them. So I think that that's, kind of coming into what Stand Up, Speak Up is all about is when we went to court, we weren't planning to ask about her going home. But the conversation was kind of more about finding yet another foster home and hoping that that one would stick. And I knew at this point that it was if I didn't say anything, we would just continue to stay in the same loop of find her a new placement, have her not want to be there and have her run away. So I did speak up and I said to the judge, Your Honor, I know that she's been described as a runaway. Obviously, that is what the pattern of her behavior has shown us. But I think that she really needs to be in community with her family. Like that is one of the biggest things that we tend to forget is that within the family, that is a kid's community. And we keep taking her away from that. That's, not going to help her heal. And I kind of presented it that I think that we could potentially look at reunifying her with her mom because in this circumstance, her mom wasn't the reason why she was in foster care. But really, I was just so impressed that the judge actually listened to me. And I also had a caseworker that was also very interested in seeing whether or not this could be something, could be a potential option for her, because everything else that had been tried short of, you know, institutionalizing her was not working. So um, the judge had to ponder it. It wasn't something he immediately was like, that sounds like a great idea. But he was willing to say that we should look into it. And he tasked the CPS worker with doing some due diligence and finding out whether she could even go home, whether mom was willing to let her come back. And I think that that was, the key was we asked the right question based on what this little girl had told us through not even necessarily the words that she was saying, but just the way that we observed, or I observed her, was that she needed to be at home and she needed to be around her family. And because I think she'd seen how everything outside of family, eventually they turn your back on you when you're no longer useful. And so they'd gotten arranged some visits home so that she could go and kind of reacclimate to being back at home. They got the family into family therapy, and they created one of what we call the safety plan to make sure that if things were starting to go south, that they had people in place that they could call to make sure that someone safe could be there and check in on them. And I'm so happy Maria got to go home, and she was finally ready to stay in that home. And she was able to see that everything that we'd been working towards wasn't to keep her under the thumb of CPS or under my thumb. It was really all to make sure that when she got to where she should be, that she was going to be safe there. So if I hadn't said something to the judge, I think we would have probably seen this case go the way so many teen cases go, which is they don't want to be where they're at, and so we find stricter and stricter places to put them. And so I'm really very, very happy that the outcome was that she was able to reunify with her family and had the right conditions to be successful in doing so. So yeah, all that came from really just listening to what she was saying, but also listening to what she wasn't saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what I love. I think, like you said, you could have so easily have missed that comment just as a offhanded comment, or she's sad today, or she must be thinking about brother or whatever that may be. But like you said, seeing what is she telling me without telling me? Right. And I think so often we're in a hurry or we're rushed or we're so narrowly focused on one thing, we miss some of those little things. Or even like you said, what kids aren't telling us sometimes, what are they telling us through their behaviors? Right. Especially those nonverbal kids. Because sometimes you're right, they don't have the social emotional capacity necessarily to say what they want or what their wishes are. But what is their behavior telling us? In this example, perfect, right? Like, yeah, she was running towards, like, yeah, not running necessarily away from foster care, but trying to run back to something that was familiar to her. And yeah, that's a great story. That's super powerful. And I can't even imagine, I'm sure the relationship between you and her, I'm sure just probably spiraled after that. But then just not, I mean, just even your ability to think outside the box for that, like knowing, okay, if I don't speak up, we're just going to keep repeating that vicious cycle. And like you said, and I mean, your specialty area is adolescence and those teenagers, we tend to just see like, yeah, placement after placement after placement, and then higher level of care and institutionalization, and then aging out, which we don't want. So, awesome
Hmm.
story and a great example of how every little detail matters, even if you don't think it does, right? So those small
Well,
updates.
and what's interesting,
Uh-huh.
she's found she just turned 18 last month, and she's at home and she's completing her high set. And I mean, I can't have asked for a better outcome for her. So there is something to be said for that, just the power of listening to kids and being willing to sometimes sometimes you might be feeling like you might advocate for the wrong thing. But as long as you're actually doing what we train you to do, which is look at their best interests and speak the truth about those, maybe you get shut down, but I'd rather always know that we made the attempt, that we said what we needed to say and left nothing on the table.
Yeah. I love that you said that because sometimes you're right. Sometimes the advocate is the only one. I think your situation, it was great that the judge took that into consideration and the caseworker was supportive. But you're right, there's going to be certain circumstances or situations where you might be the only one that can see that vision or that future, and everybody else may be the naysayers. But yeah, at least at the end of the day, we can feel good knowing that I spoke up, I advocated for the best interest. Yeah, they may not be where I'm at, and they can't see that vision yet, but hopefully you're
Mm-hmm.
right. We'll keep planting those seeds. And no, I think that's great. And like you said, that best interest advocacy, right? Like what's going on with school, the emotional health, their placement, all those little details add up to create this bigger picture of who this child is. And really, I feel like that's a big part of the role of CASA is because most of the folks that we work with or in that courtroom are never going to meet this kiddo, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
how do we give that full picture of not just what's on paper, not just what's on the surface, but who is this child, right? What makes them tick? What makes them laugh? What makes them scared? And yeah, so having that relationship, knowing your child, knowing when something is off is so important because then you are going to notice those small changes. You're going to notice, okay, something's off today. What's going on? Let's talk, right? Normally you're
Mm-hmm.
pretty good. And yeah, maybe you're just having a bad day, but maybe not. And so that's where that relationship and knowing your kiddo is so important because then you never know what small bit of information could change that whole picture. Or in your case,
So true.
it changed the rest of her life, right? I mean, that was definitely a fork in the road, a path moment, and it went one way because you spoke up, and it could have very much went a different way. So that's awesome. Great story. Okay, so I would love to kind of segue or move us into some practical tips. Again, court is scary, right? And so what are some advice or what's some advice or how do you coach your advocates in preparing for court?
Oh, well, I mean, I think that we we really want to just be going back to the thing, like this is why it is so important to document in detail what has happened during our visit. So it's our contact logs are going to be so important because where our memory, we'd love to rely on our memory to remember the things that maybe we want to bring up. Sometimes those things aren't going to come as easily. Many of us are working, we have other obligations that come to the forefront of our mind. So, especially when we want to be prepared, you have to actually go back, review your contact logs, and jot down some of the key observations from your own contact logs. Um, so I think it's really important too. Part of this is like observations are not the same as questions. Questions that you have should be asked outside of court. So if you want to get information from the caseworker on what's happening with a certain aspect of the case, it's not a good idea to do that while you're having that opportunity to speak up. So kind of understanding where what our task is there and knowing there is a place to ask those questions and not necessarily to make court the place that you want to put someone on the spot for that.
Right. Don't
So
throw people
tip
under the
number
bus.
one,
Yeah, don't
review
throw
your
people under the bus.
contact logs. Yep, exactly. Tip number two, and sometimes even I still struggle with this because I like to think that I'm great at improv, but sometimes I get up and my words, I don't remember like what word I was searching for. So stick to clear and factual language. So you want to focus on the child and not any opinions about the parents. And sometimes I even say, it's okay to be factual about the conditions of the foster parents' home, but it's also a good idea to remember that you're not there to advocate for the foster parents, you're there to advocate for the child. So they can be doing a great job and it's okay to tell them that, but it's also good just to keep what you're saying about the child's experience in that foster home specific to the child. Johnny loves that he gets to have pancakes for breakfast on the weekends, and that's something that he's getting more consistently now, but not these foster parents are great because they're making Johnny pancakes on the weekends. Focus on Johnny and not what
Mhm.
the foster parents are doing. Um, and tip number three, if you're not called on, it's okay to politely stand up and speak up. I raised my hand in court because I had something in addition to what I'd already said that I wanted to add. And so I just made sure I had my hand up, and then the judge was able to say, did you have something that you wanted to add? And so when you're called upon for something like that, you can say, Your Honor, if I may, I do have an update regarding the child's name. Some courtrooms, it is the expectation that the CASA is going to be called on after everyone else. But sometimes judges forget. It's not because they don't want to hear from you. It's just because there's a lot of information coming at them. So it's okay to remind them that you're there and that you do have something that you want to say. And, you know, it's also part of it to say, I'd like to share an observation that may help the court understand something. So specifically, because this just happened today, is I had already made a recommendation that communication between a child and parents be done via letter to establish communication, because this child was older. And then it was brought up that there was also grandparents that maybe wanted to be in communication as well. And so my suggestion, I just raised my hand and I said, just wanted to also add, just like I recommended for the parents, perhaps this would be a good opportunity for grandparents to also write letters or cards, so that this child is able to start that process of getting to know them that way. So it's okay sometimes to add a little something if you see that there is an opportunity there for you to um, create clarification or better understanding of that child and their needs.
Yeah, awesome. I
Oh,
like
and
that.
tip number 4.
Oh,
Keep it concise. 2 or 3 points are usually enough. So this can be really hard if you're someone who speaks in paragraphs like myself, but if you are coming in prepared with 2 or 3 things, that's great. It's much easier when you have something written about the things that you want to share than just trying to improvise it, like obviously I sometimes do.
yeah. No, that's a great one. That's a great one. And I think I would add probably a fifth tip. I think something that I learned throughout my years working, in child welfare and now too, not forgetting our body language, right? So not only when we're sitting in the seats, right, not having those side conversations, but paying attention because those side conversations I feel like can often get distracting. Even like I know like when I've sat in the courtroom and people are having a conversation behind me, it gets distracting. And so I think being aware of that when you're sitting and waiting for your turn, but then when it is your turn, standing up when addressing the court. I think that just shows that respect, but it also just shows that, I mean, yeah, you're here and I'm going to stand up to address the court. And I know a lot of the other parties don't, which that's kind of foreign to me. I'm used to everybody standing up, but definitely want our advocates stand up when addressing the court, make eye contact, speak clearly, right? That confidence. Go back to Mary Rose's example. You're speaking for that kid. Sometimes those kids would be screaming, right? Or not using their inside voice, but this is a time where stand up and be confident.
And one thing that I noticed today in the courtroom is the reason why those other parties don't stand up is because there are mics on the table in front of them. In order
Mm-hmm.
for them to be heard on the record, all of those attorneys are sitting down because that means they're closer to the mic. It's not due to a lack of respect for the judge, it's because they need to have their voices be projected straight into the microphone. So I think that's also a good reminder,
Mm-hmm.
is that if we didn't have like these digital setups in the courtroom where people did have a mic in front of them, they would be standing up as well.
No, thank you. Thank you for highlighting that. And I guess even more reason to stand up and speak clearly so that our voice gets onto those recordings as well, right? Because if we're sitting down and speaking quietly, they're not going to be able to pick that up on any kind of recordings either. So
Mhm.
awesome. Thank you. Those are great tips. Okay, so if you're up for it, I know this kind of makes people cringe, right? When they go to trainings or oh my gosh, there's role playing. I have a feeling that you're going to love this. So if we could practice a couple of courtroom situations, if you're up for it. All right. Okay, so we just talked through this one. So I am the judge and I'm talking, 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 and I'm about ready to end the hearing, and I have not called on you to speak.
Your Honor, If I may, I do have an update for my recent visit with the child with Johnny. And I would be standing, but obviously for the purposes of this Zoom. And usually when I'm just doing the hand raising part before I give it, I usually am not necessarily standing up at that point. It's up to you. But when I'm calling attention to myself, it's okay just to raise my hand. And then as soon as I'm called on, what
Yeah.
about
So, of course. Oh, I'm sorry. Miss Swan, did you have something you would like to add?
Just kidding. I'm gonna sit down. But I observed that Johnny has been doing really well in school, but he did recently let me know he's feeling very anxious about changing placements soon. So I do think it would be beneficial for maybe him to go meet with the new placement before that placement change happens, just so that he can get acclimated and see a little bit more of their home before he moves in.
Awesome. Okay, scenario two, take two. Okay, so everybody is in the courtroom talking about something, and you pretty much agree. And yeah, I agree with all that. I don't have really anything big to add. I don't even know if I should speak up, right? Like, they haven't called on me. Like, do I stand up and speak up? Do I even say anything?
And this, I feel like, was exactly by the end of this hearing when we were coming to this decision is I just raised my hand and I said, even though it may seem minor, I wanted to share an observation or a suggestion that I think may be helpful to this child's well-being.
Yeah, awesome. So again, going back to our original conversation, even the smallest thing, right? It may seem minor to us, but again, okay, is it minor to the child? Could it change the directory of this case, right? Could it change that path? And so, and if maybe even not, but at least again, you're standing up and you're speaking for that child. You're not letting folks in that courtroom forget that we have a kiddo here that we're talking for. It's not a DN number, it's not a case number, it's not a name, but yeah, you're standing up and speaking for that kiddo. Love it. Okay, so again, so you agree, typically you just stand up and say, I have nothing else to add, Your Honor, because caseworker, you're pretty much said it all. You have nothing else to add. Maybe what's something else maybe that you could say instead of, I have nothing else to add, Your Honor.
You know, for example, today I would have looked and said, while I think the caseworker covered all of the major updates, I did want to highlight that this child's grades recently have reflected that they've been putting a lot more work into their schoolwork and getting their assignments turned in. And that has resulted in at least 3 A's on this report card.
I love that. So referencing your report, so one reminding like, hey, I have great information in that report I submitted, and then yeah, highlighting something from that. I love that. Okay, so this situation actually came up recently with an advocate, and so wanted to throw this in there, especially now that we don't have the GALs or the attorney special advocates on cases that it's us. So if a judge asks you your position, what is your official position on extending legal custody or moving towards guardianship in this case? But they want your official position.
Yes, this can be very like if you feel put on the spot by this, then of course it might feel like you know, got caught without doing your homework. So it's really good to know that this is a question that advocates are being asked specifically at hearings where there is, status update or status hearings, you probably won't be hearing this as much. But when it's extension of legal custody, or if there is some type of action that's being taken from that hearing and you're asked a position, you can either just say, I agree with what's already been said, or if you disagree, you really need to come to the table with a good reason why. So, for example, today, there might have been it was talking about a placement, so there can be placement hearings, and if you disagree with a placement change or something of that nature, then you really want to come with the reason why. And you would want to talk to your peer coordinator and your maybe even your program coordinator to better identify the best way that you can disagree and state your case and make your points, so that it's not just I disagree. I just don't think it's a good idea. So I think judges will really listen to advocates more if we can provide the reasoning behind why we disagree with something, especially it's hard sometimes when everyone else agrees with it. So we can help you with that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that example that, and it kind of goes back to, yeah, we want to play nice in the sandbox, but it doesn't mean that we're always going to agree, right? It doesn't mean that,
Absolutely.
and so yeah, I think having that your ducks in a row, having those concrete objective examples of this is why I don't agree, or this is even maybe why maybe you and caseworker are in support of something and child's attorney's not, right? So I agree. I think having those facts laid out and being prepared on those bigger hearings like XTLC, placement, permanency, so if you're called on, like you said, that you're not caught, like a deer in the headlight look, that okay, I am prepared. I know what I'm going to state and why I feel so strongly about yes or no. And I would even say tie it back to best interest. Why is this not in the best interest of the child, or why is it in the best interest of the child? That, is our focus area. And so going back to best interest, our reports really capture those best interest things. And so I again, yeah, agree with you, Mary. Is prepare, right? Prepare with your PC, prepare with your program staff. What are the best interests? How do I say what I'm feeling or what I'm thinking, and putting that down on paper.
Absolutely.
So no, I think that's
100%.
great. Like you said, because again, even if you've been to court a few times, you can still kind of get caught off guard and be a little nervous, like, oh my gosh, like my official opinion. So that is kind of
Yeah.
new for us. That's something new for us, right? So no, I love that. Okay, thank
Go in
you.
with the confidence, go
Yes,
in with the confidence of an attorney. You
I
don't
love
have to
that.
have the background, you don't have to have the education to have the confidence. And
Hmm?
if you need a little extra confidence, just call the office, ask to speak with me, and I will
Yeah.
hype you up.
Uh-huh. Well, and I think that's a good reminder too. If you, not only just for your first, but we are always more than happy to go to court with you. If you are worried that it's going to be a contested hearing or that things are going to get crazy, ask your PC or ask your program coordinator to come with you. We would be more than happy to come and, like you said, pump you up from those stands like you got this and be your cheerleader. Absolutely. So
I've
that's
been an
great.
advocate for 6 years, and I had a hearing that I asked my supervisor to go with me just because I
Uh-huh.
knew what I had to say was not going to be popular,
Yeah.
and it didn't necessarily change the outcome, but I knew that I had done my best to make sure that I was advocating for the best interest of the child. So sometimes it is also just that, like what you've already explained, is don't worry about whether you get what you want from the outcome. Like sometimes I think that is we have to separate ourselves from the outcome and just speak from that best interest standpoint.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, thank you for playing along through the role playing. And I think everything that you just expressed and talked about, again, just how important it is that we're present in the courtroom, being that visual reminder, and that we're talking about big decisions that have big impacts on the kids we serve. And so, yeah, at the end of the day, feeling good that, okay, I said what I needed to say. Like you said, it may not go the direction I like it, but I know that I fought for that child or that I brought that child's voice to the courtroom today. So hold your head high. Okay, if we could transition, you've already given us a lot of really great examples of things that advocates can share in court, but I'm wondering if there are maybe a few other examples of things that folks or advocates could bring up in court to share.
Absolutely, because like we said, there's really no reason to not have something that you can add when you're asked, but it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be a paragraph. So keep it child focused. I mean, any update that you give that is just specifically a child focused update is going to be welcome. So those can be things like, during my visit, Johnny shared that they feel really safe and supported in their placement. Or I noticed that Johnny seems really anxious when he's discussing visits with his parents. Um, School reports show that Johnny is improving in math and is participating in extracurriculars. Those are so important to really kind of provide that normalcy to a child. So when you're staying in contact with schools and finding out about those things, don't forget to ask about extracurriculars, clubs, or even some of their elective classes that aren't part of their major core work. So if you have concerns or needs that need to be addressed, those are things that you can bring up as well. Like I said, don't try to ask questions, but you can say things like, I have concerns about Johnny's current placement because I've noticed that he has withdrawn more during my visits. Or it seems that Johnny would benefit from additional counseling or support in tutoring because he is maybe struggling with math, and it's been identified that's an area that he could improve in. Or at our last hearing, we had identified that Johnny was going to receive some tutoring, and I can confirm that that has happened, and that has resulted in him showing some improvement in his math test
Mhm.
scores. So all of those things are ways that you can bring up either a concern or a need, or when one that you've brought up previously has actually been addressed. I love when we can close the loop on some of those things.
Yeah, I
And
love
then
that.
also using this as an opportunity to provide some positive reinforcement. So, things like, I want to highlight that Johnny's progress has been made in this specific area. So I was able to go to an IEP meeting recently for a kiddo on one of my cases, and they were so great with the specifics of, this was the goal, he met it, now we've moved the goalpost. So those are things that judges really like to hear, is maybe sometimes where kids are making progress. And because otherwise, we obviously, if there are concerns, bring them up, but don't forget that there are things that we can highlight in terms of things that are going well.
I love that. One of the questions, or I know something that we've talked about sometimes, is a lot of times these hearings become about the parents or highlighting maybe what they're not doing so well. Would you ever recommend or suggest to an advocate pointing out any of these things regarding a parent? That a parent is doing well, or I really want to highlight this, or I would really encourage mom to start going to visits. Is that something that you would ever encourage advocates to do?
I love to hear advocates giving parents kudos during hearings, because they are the ones that are doing the work. And one of my favorite things is when we can hear what we're doing well, because you're right. Parents are often hearing what they need to do better. And sometimes advocates might be one of the only people to say, I see you. I see the work that you're doing. I know it's hard, but you're doing really good. But we've seen some judges do it, and I love to see judges acknowledging it as well. But, there is something to be said for hearing from someone who really may not know you that well, that they are seeing you do the hard work, and they recognize that you're doing your best.
I love that. It goes back to what you were saying in the very beginning, even about, I think it was Maria's case that we were specifically talking about, that hope. When our kids lose hope, and maybe it was in reference to just older youth, but when they lose hope, right, what do they have to work towards? And I could see that being the very same with the parents, right? Giving them hope, like, you can do this, right? Baby steps, right? Good job on, 3 weeks, sober, or getting to your UAs, or getting to your treatment, or coming to your visits, and keep doing that. So I love that. I love that. Thank you. Okay, so I know we're kind of getting to the end of our time, but I still feel like we can talk maybe around this fear hesitation about speaking up in court. And I'm bringing it up again because I know that's the biggest. Every time when new classes swear in, they're like, "I'm afraid of court. I'm afraid of court," and I think it's just that stage fright piece. Again, going back to, I'm just a bother. Um, what would you say to those advocates? Kind of again, kind of some last tips and tricks on that stage fright and how they get over that.
Well, I mean, you know me, and if you don't know me, you wouldn't know this, but well, first of all, I'm one of those weirdos that loves public speaking, and I love community theater. I love getting on stage. So I realize that I am definitely the exception and not the rule. But I think just because I'm used to doing those things doesn't mean that I don't get nervous about doing them. And I think that one of the biggest ways to combat it. The reason why, when you're doing a production of anything, rehearsing is part of the process. So being prepared is going to be the biggest way to fight stage fright, is if you know what you want to say rather than coming up with it on the fly, because improvisation is where you are going to be more nervous. So, if you don't have something ready and the judge asks you if you have anything that you want to add, you're probably going to freeze. And that is terrifying. I think we're all terrified that we're going to freeze. So it's also a good reminder that the judge, while they are someone that is to be respected, they have the law experience to have gotten onto that bench and wear those robes, but you don't have to be afraid of them. Um, there are times that I think that we've kind of maybe given them this maybe role of a really powerful figure, but they're people just like we are, and they are there for those kids just the same as the advocates are. Um, so we aren't bothering them if they're asking us to speak up for that child. So we really, that is our job. And if they're asking us to do our job, then I think they want to hear what we have to say versus just I don't have anything to add. Thank you. They wouldn't be asking, and if they aren't asking, raise your hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think in Yellowstone County, we have judges that are very welcoming of CASAs in their courtrooms, and so I think it's just a good reminder that you are not the first, nor will you be the last. And the CASAs that tend to maybe see the best side of their judges are the ones that are willing to engage in that process a little bit and speak up when they're asked to.
I love that. And I think a good reminder too, having two new judges coming on after the first of the year. What a great opportunity, those first few advocates in their courtroom to set the precedent of being called on, right? And so if they get used to not ever hearing from the CASA, oh, and the CASAs just sit there and they'll speak up if they have something to say, we have an opportunity to, like I said, to set the stage for that nope, we're going to stand up, we're
Mhm.
going to speak up, please call on us, because if you don't, we're going to stand up and say something anyway, right? And so really taking advantage of the two new judges coming our way, I think is a great idea.
And
um
law is all about precedence. Like when we talk about law, precedence is the name of the game. They're always talking about, well, so that is part of it, is that we don't want to set a precedence where we aren't willing to speak up, and then they're just going to assume that all causes will be like that. So I feel
yeah,
like it's almost like a duty of ours to make sure that they know that we will
yeah.
be vocal in their courtrooms especially when we're called upon.
Yep. I love that because people notice when you don't, right? I think we notice when other parties in hearings have nothing to add. And right, we start picking up on that, like, huh, they never have anything to add. And so you're right, people are paying attention.
Hmm.
Any additional advice that you would give for some of those shyer folks, right? Like, so we have some very passionate advocates and they love the behind the scenes and they love interacting with the kiddos. But again, like, I would rather just stay behind the scenes. Any different advice that you would give them?
At the risk of sounding a little stern, I'm going to just say that I think every advocate has something to contribute. And I think we've hit this point home several times. Your voice matters. And so you should not be underestimating it. So this is where I'm going to get stern. If you don't speak up, no one else will. And that can be a challenge to you. I want anyone that's watching this or listening to this to really feel that challenge is, if I don't do this, who else will? And know that the answer is nobody. There are a lot of people in that courtroom, and as you said, there we notice who does speak up and who does not, and what they share. And I think that over time we've seen that CASAs that do speak up and use that time to make sure that that child stays in the room, that they
Mhm.
are sitting beside you, and
Mhm.
that they are having the opportunity to make sure that they stay at the center of what all of that is about. We wouldn't be having a hearing if it wasn't for that child. So we want to make sure that their name is spoken, that they are in the courtroom, even if it's just through your presence.
I love that. Yes, awesome. Yes, no, I think that's great. I think it's like you said, not only our duty, but an honor. right? That you are
Ooh.
there speaking in this I mean, yeah, thinking of it as an honor to be that child's voice and to speak on their behalf and just yeah, what an honor bestowed on us, right? To change these children's lives and be a part of that. That's huge. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And one of the things or advice that was given to me, and I like to share sometimes too, is speak up even if your voice shakes, right? It's okay if it's a little nervous, but you're still standing up, right? It can be scary. I think it gets easier the more time you do it.
Mhm.
And kind of what you mentioned before, right? You don't want to walk out of that courtroom feeling guilty that I should have said something or I should have spoke up and having that regret when you walk out versus coming out and be like, yep, I feel like I really represented Johnny in court today, right? And feeling good about
Mhm.
that. So, Mary Rose, thank you so much for your words of wisdom, for going through the scenarios with me, for just even participating in our first, Child's Voices podcast. I think we're going to call it. So, super exciting. I think great wisdom to share. I look forward to a lot more conversations with you in the future. I think we're excited to see where the Child's Voice podcast goes. Mary Rose and I have lots of exciting ideas to bring your way. I would say, yeah, if you're listening to this and we haven't done maybe a podcast on a particular topic that you would like to see done, let us know. Reach out to Mary Rose or myself and say, hey, I would love for you guys to do one on this topic, or interview this person. And so I think the sky's the limit for this and we'll see where we go. But thank you, everybody that's watching this right now, for joining us. Make sure that you review your court notes before you go. Practice speaking up, and remember, you are that child's advocate, and that child counts on us. So, hashtag stand up, speak up. Until next
Hashtag.
time. Yes, until next time, thank you all.
Bye.